as we speak right now. The SOP is there, and then we really sell these trucks. And only if society feels the pressure that something has cost, it tries to avoid that. Certainly here you can see that also there hydrogen might play a role. We have a complete revolution of our business anyhow in our hand. So there is really need for change.
Welcome, Frederik Zohm, to the podcast, The Hydrogen Leader. I'm very happy that I have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Björn, for inviting me.
Yeah, so we are here in the R&D headquarters of MAN in Munich in Germany. And as you know, the podcast, The Hydrogen Leader, targets to inspire other professionals to become hydrogen leaders. And I know you for several years, and I think many people can learn a lot from you, because I think you are an outstanding professional, and we will talk about your leadership approach and also your insights that you have in zero-emission industry and specifically also in the hydrogen industry. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Let's start with a very basic question, dear Frederik. Who is Frederik Zohm?
Well, we know each other, but perhaps your audience doesn't know me so good. Yeah, so I'm born in Lower Saxony, and then I studied mechanical engineering in Aachen, and I studied also economics in St. Gallen in Switzerland. And then started off with my professional life in different truck bus companies. So started at Daimler, where I also met you for a couple of my years together.
Yes.
And then joined MAN in 2017. And since then I'm here head of technology, CTO.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, congratulations. I think your board member contract has been renewed. So you are the board member for R&D in a very interesting time where you now need to change your company also a lot, right?
Yes, and these interesting times are already on since I'm joined here. Yeah,
Yes.
because what we see now on the ground, like our trucks with new propulsion systems, either battery electric driven or hydrogen driven, certainly started when I also started here. So then the first concept were derived, and then we decided about what do we do for serious development. Yeah, so it's super special times.
Yes.
With the change, especially in the powertrain technologies, but then on top digitalization on processes, but also on our product performances in front of our customers, and then certainly on top of it, the automation. So there's a lot to do for us.
Yeah, before we speak about the subject that you are working on, I want to shortly touch upon the leadership style you have. I am speaking about being a driven professional. What I recall when we worked on big M&A projects together, that you were super driven, laser focused, always responsive, but had this unique ability to see details, but do not lose the overall picture. Is that a fair description of your work style?
I would like to buy that, yes. Yes. So it's like, you're right. I mean, the one thing is have the oversight, strategic thinking, looking around the next 3, 4, 5 curves and ahead of the years, especially as a CTO. But I think to a job always also belongs that you go to Gemba. Yeah? You need to go when you feel there's pain. You need to go there. You need to go there by you personally, and that doesn't mean to micromanagement, but it means to go where perhaps things don't work well, where things stuck, and try to release them together with the team, because it's never one person's wonder or healing hand who helped to overcome a situation, but it's important that when things get stuck, that you walk there, discuss with the team, and try to resolve it in order to release pressure and then get focus back again and things back on track.
I also know Friedrich Baumann, and he's also a board member at MAN. I would also say he has the same qualities in that regard. And is this the DNA that you need to become a board member of a global German company?
That I cannot tell you. There you need to ask the guys who are appointing board members.
The supervisory board?
Yes. What I can tell you is I believe in professional life is important to have this ability to think ahead, but have also your personal knowledge and really make a difference by the decisions you take.
Being a board member, I think, is probably a very interesting but also a very challenging job. Yeah, and what is the best part of being a board member in these times, and what is the biggest challenge that you face in your daily life?
I think the best part is working together with a team and have so many different inputs. Yeah, so as you have to oversee a broad variance of discussions, and you have, I mean, great experts working in your team, you get a lot of insights and have the ability really to learn a lot. This is the enjoyable part of it. Second part to it is at the end, you can make the decision and really change things by helping to come to certain decisions where you believe we need to go. And I think the harder part is you have then also to burden the decision and you have to take the consequences of your decisions when then the supervisory board rethinks if they want to prolong your contract, yes or no.
I once heard a very nice statement that said, if you want to make a career in a big company, you make sure that you're never faced with your own decisions. Now you are basically until 2030, I think you make decisions and you need to bear the burden of your decisions in a good way and in a bad way, right? So, but I think you want to deliver results, and this is probably special for a board member, right? That this result-driven leadership.
I think your quote is wrong. Which this assumption it's leading by example. So if you make a decision, you have to face the consequences. That starts in school, or that is what we teach also in our families, our kids. There, you need to live with the consequences of your decisions, and I think that's super important also for leaderships, being board member, yes or no. But leaders have to face that they take the decision, and if they took it, they also should stand for it. Yeah, in order to be reliable in this what we call walk the talk or lead example.
Yeah, it's also true in smaller companies like Hyfindr. So I just heard it, and it's not my attitude. Yeah. Speaking about leadership, I know you as a leader, but you also have to build leaders, right? And I wanted to ask you whether you can recall a situation in the past where you were impressed by leadership in your company that you really said, wow, this was great leadership in my team. I'm really impressed because, so that I ask myself, you're also watching leaders grow.
Yes.
Is there a situation that you can recall?
I would not put it on a single situation, but what I would put in is that at MAN we have this team-oriented performance culture, which is basically our headline for leadership development. And they said these two aspects of leadership. The one is the performance culture by driving decisions and really know your business. And the other one is team-oriented. Yeah, don't put yourself above the team, but be part of the team and come and drive the team to the right decisions. So, and whenever you see that, you see by speak-up culture, raising your hand and saying, hey, dare to try. These are the things which really make differences in leadership. Especially when we are in crucial waters, when it's not so easy. Also to bespeak. To have a little bit this. I always say in R&D, you need this report against red culture. Dare to say it's, for me, the traffic light is red. I believe we have here a problem. Take the end in court like you do in production and really, and that is, I think, hard sometimes to do. It's more easy to give it a yellow and then just follow it up and see what happens. So there, I think you can see great leadership when you see those people and persons acting in a team-oriented but also performance-driven way.
I think you're also seeing the times when you have performed as a leader. I realized that you have been in Japan when Fukushima happened. You have seen the Corona crisis when you had a big role in MAN, now also the disruption of supply chains. What do you say do these crisis situations have in common for you as a leader? And what is most important to do as a leader in these crisis situations to keep the ship moving?
Yeah, I think the first thing in crisis is you need to stay cool. Yeah, your brain needs to work. Yeah, so if the blood pressure is too high,
Avoid fear.
yeah, avoid fear. You could say.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, you really need to keep up the level of a certain distance to the problem to make also you're perhaps in the middle of the problem. Yeah, and when you recall Fukushima, you don't only have a problem as a company, you have a problem of yourself and of your family and involved persons. So it's a more obvious, broader problem.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, you need to handle all those different problems which are caused by one incident together, and try to really stay cool, stay ahead, and find also those in the teams who don't overreact, but also say, yeah, also I never experienced a situation like this. I believe we do it like that. And for example, especially in Japan, when I recall a little bit that situation, was super special because I had a great team. At that time, I worked in procurement in order to really said, we come, we meet the next days, we take care of our suppliers, we take care of our families, we take care of a lot of things. So then you really rely also on your team to have this ability to stay cool.
I think you are a great leader, but you probably also sometimes go home with the attitude, okay, today I could have done better. And because we are not perfect, we are humans, right? And how do you react in that? And what keeps you going when you reflect on your own behavior and say, that was not good?
I think that we worked a couple of years ago. We decided in our management team of R&D that we do a reverse mentoring, and really asked persons out of our team staff persons to reflect for half a year on our leadership behavior, and that was one of our, I mean, and my personal greatest learnings. Yeah, they really speak up on your weaknesses, and then you can work on that.
And they are outside of your reporting lines?
Yes,
so
well, they're in the team.
In
Yeah,
the
but it's
team?
not no direct reports,
Yeah.
and they reflect a little bit about our behaviors, how we solve solutions, how we debate,
Okay.
how we also behave in meetings, and
So
and
a coaching in
it's a
the
kind,
organization.
yes, it's a coaching in the organization, and
Oh,
that
this
was
is great, yeah.
a super strong learning for all of us, and
Okay.
especially for me. And I think one of those learnings is sometimes you get in heated discussions, and then we just had this crisis mode. Yeah, also heated discussions always need the cool head and thinking, and not only emotions on the plate, because that will not solve the solutions if everybody puts in his full emotions. Sometimes it's needed in order to free up the space, but to take yourself a little bit back. Yeah. To listen more than to talk. These are the learnings you take then out of these situations.
Yeah, and I think also your employees, they don't want a machine as a leader. They know we are all humans,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And I think you are a very approachable guy, and I think this is also very important that regardless which role you have in organization, that people can come to you and
Yeah, that's
tell
for
you.
me the most important thing. I mean, I'm appointed. I have people around me who trust in me and give me this role. But it's only for a certain period of time, and only inside of the organization you have then this role. If you're outside of the organization, you don't have that role, or it's not anticipated that you have that role. So I think we are all humans. We can all behave like humans, and this is the most important thing, that also the role doesn't change yourself in your behaviors too much from where you actually be.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is very insightful. And now speaking a little bit more about what MAN is doing. I think MAN is known as a global brand, but I know that you are very passionate about the decarbonizing of the heavy duty sector. Can you explain why this is important for your company and also for society?
Yeah, but let's start with the society perspective first. I mean, we build goods for transportation purposes. Either we transport people when we build buses, or we transport goods, then we build trucks. And when you talk about a normal truck, which we see on mainly on the highways, which is a 4x2, they run 100 to 200,000 kilometers. They consume in between 20 to 30 liters of diesel, meaning that it's roundabout in average 30,000 liters of diesel per year. So it's a significant impact on our CO2 footprint in the world. And if you look only on our Scope 3 pollutions by CO2, it's around about 160 million tons, which is in between Netherlands and Austria overall.
really?
Just by the amount of trucks and buses registered under the bin of MAN. So there is really need for change in order to reduce decarbonization, especially in transportation has a big impact. And especially goods transportation long haul. And therefore, we focus since a long time on these subjects. You could define different starting points. A long time ago, we developed first battery trucks. Then 2009, we operated with first hydrogen buses. We did it on the Munich airport. In 2012, we followed up then with hybrid buses. But at that point of time, I think also our customers were not really ready to use it. The sold amount of buses, for example, were pretty low. Acceptance was pretty low. That certainly changed also over the growing awareness about climate change and the impact of carbons on that climate change. And then we started off in 2017-18 with first battery electric trucks, which we first tried in a smaller series, kind of a B-sample phase in Austria. And then later on, as we speak, then developed into series. And as we speak right now, the SOP is there, and then we really sell this truck. So everybody can now decide of our customers if they want to make a difference. For every product, we have also a decarbonized powertrain ready.
Yeah, let me go back one step where you said we need to change. And I realized that sometimes change is intrinsic, but sometimes also change is driven by regulation. And in the heavy-duty sector, I understand that there is EU regulation requiring your fleet of new sold cars, new sold trucks, as I understand it, to be basically zero-free, 45% by 2030 and 90% by 2040. And how big of a driver is that for your strategy?
I think it's twofold. It's never the one unique effort. I mean, it would be nice to say it's a pure environmental understanding of ourselves that this is needed. That could be one answer, but certainly regulations is a further driver to do so. And when you really would like to change the transportation issue on a bigger scale, in a fast environment and in a faster time, then you need also regulatory support to really make it happen. When we talk about changes in drivetrains, we not only change about the product change is needed, we need to debate also then about the infrastructure change, because currently we have fueling stations for diesel all around Europe, allowing basically these transportations. And now if we change then the drivetrain to different medias, be it battery electrics or be it hydrogen, then you need to change also that infrastructure. And therefore you need more players for that change. And if you want to do that fast, then you need also regulations to enhance it.
It's also leveling the playing field more or less for everybody who is doing business, right?
Yeah, but you could say that when you look on the car industry, there you could see that also not so much driven by legislation, but by the offering of certain product, it seems that it picked up. So when you talk about the Tesla case, which successfully launched a brand or a product with a completely new technologies, which was certainly also foreseeable that the change will happen there on the CO2 side with our PESCA colleagues, but I think it was
ahead
more
of time.
I think it was rather driven by offering a different solution, which then found their customers.
In preparation of our interview here, I found also another video where you were passionate about the idea of raising CO2 prices, also for your customers. And I find this quite extraordinary because having, let's say, a leader of a truck company asking for a cost burden on your customers, that was, let's say, surprising to hear. Can you explain that a bit?
I would see that differently. I mean, CO2 has an impact. If you believe in climate change, mankind driven, then CO2 is one part of the equation, perhaps one of the biggest part. If that's the case, it should have a price tag, because we are living in a capitalistic world where price make difference. And only if society feels the pressure that something has cost, it tries to avoid that. Yeah. So if we would like to avoid CO2, then perhaps you should give it a price. And that's how I start the thinking model about CO2 needs a price in order to really reflect their impact. Yeah. So if a flood like in the Ahrtal is coming up with CO2 because it's driven by climate change, then these costs are super high burden for us as a society, and therefore we as a society should reflect and get this cost back by those who consume CO2. And that's the first thought to it. The second thought to it, when you think it then on the more individual basis, then it's certain that individuals, by their own purchasing power, have different abilities to cope with CO2 prices on an individual level. Meaning that millionaires have certainly a more easy way to cope with CO2 prices than normally paid inhabitants of Europe. And therefore, I believe that transport logistics is perhaps the most fairest game where you can make price CO2, because it's then basically not distributed on the pure individual, if it would be with directly on individual mobility or on how you heat your homes. I mean, we had this debate in Germany about these topics, but when you put it on transport logistics, then it's we need to divide it by 400 millions, because we are all using transport every day, because everything we have on our clothes, which we have in our fridges, which is at home, was at least 3 or 4 times on a truck. Yeah, so then that's perhaps one of the most fairest distribution when you think about giving CO2 a price.
Yeah, and when I prepared, I think the trucking industry is very much driven by the total cost of ownership. So any investment in a truck is more or less a business case, and you need to assess it from a 360 point of view, right? And if CO2 would have a price to it, it would come into the Excel sheet, right?
Exactly, and that's a third part to it.
Okay.
When you want to enhance the transformation, especially in that sector, if diesel has to burden the impact of CO2, whereas other propulsion systems like battery electric or hydrogen don't have to burden that, that would make the equation of our customers differently and therefore perhaps fairer.
Thank you for this explanation. We are also in a very interesting political environment currently, because I think when this video will be released, we potentially have a new chancellor and a new government. And they have introduced their coalition treaty, which also has some, I think, regulation on trucking, on zero-2. I'm not sure whether they also have this pricing idea on zero emissions already. So I guess your company had a look at it. What do you think about the plans of the new coalition in terms for your business?
Well, I think there are a couple of aspects, and I don't have now all aspects, but the one is that already under the former government, the CO2, the release of the Maut in Germany for CO2-free transportation was decided, which also is a part of the different way of putting basically money into the decision. And this release is most likely to be expanded. That I think important because, as you stated, Björn, I mean, our customers are investors into goods. They need to make money with what they buy from us. So they don't incorporate only 1 kilometer or 1 year. They incorporate it for 3 to 4, 5 years. So they need a certain boundaries to stay robust for a longer period of time in order to make a proper calculation. So I think that's the one part which is good at it. the second part to it was that also under the Ampel coalition, it was decided to increase the tax for CO2 driving powertrains. So for our diesel powertrains, that was increased quite significantly.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it was done in December 23. It overall is a burden to our customers and a burden to all of us by 8 billion a year, which basically these additional CO2 tax or additional CO2 maut brings into for the state. And what the government also now, the new coalition, wrote down is that they would like to really reinvest this. And that was always our pledge. You can tax.
So you take money but give it back to the relevant industry.
Under the decision of the Ampel coalition, out of this 8 billion, 5 billion were mainly given to the Deutsche Bahn, which has nothing to do in the first place with truck transportation.
Yeah.
So now we see that, well, if you take it away from our customers, I think it's fair to also give it back, invest in the roads and invest then also and helping our customers also to transform themselves into CO2-free trucking and therefore enforcing and allowing and supporting investments in infrastructure as well as, charging infrastructure as well as in the truck in itself. Yeah, so I think these are the two aspects which are definitely, I believe, allowing a faster transformation into CO2-free transportation.
So overall, you see the proposals quite positive.
We cannot
we
debate
can
now
more.
the full 100 beyond 130 pages, but I just pointed out two aspects which I think are super important relevant for our industry. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So coming now more specifically on this battery and hydrogen, and I think what I learned is that MAN currently is focused on battery more or less, but you have not given up on hydrogen completely. Can you explain what the priority currently in your company is?
Yes. When you make a decision about what kind of technology do you want to bring into serious solution, at that point of time, you certainly reflect what under different evaluations, where is the technology right now. So when we needed to decide around about 17, 18, 19, where to go in 23, 24, we certainly reflected where are the different technologies at that point of time. And there's one topic to the discussion, which is the pure physics. Yeah, in the pure physics, if you take 100% green energy, you get 75% of velocity in a battery electric truck. So it's a rather super efficient system. There are not a lot of even systems in the world who are so efficient, just losing 25% of energy. So when you then would take it and use the same mass for hydrogen, well, you need first to produce it, and then the fuel cell is not as efficient. So then you are round about by 25% of velocity. So this difference between 75 and 25 is money. And somebody has to pay it. It's our customers first place, and secondly, it's ourselves. So that's one where we said, why not taking the more efficient propulsion system? You can debate, well, you need to store it, blah, 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 and doesn't you take that out of the equation? By the way, you can store electricity also without making hydrogen out of it. The second part of it, how mature, technical, robust at that point of time, you make the decision, the different technologies. And when we made this decision, we saw that the passenger car industry has already basically embarked into battery electric vehicles. Especially VW was really pushing hard onto it. Yeah, at that point of time, there was a sourcing out for 50 gigawatts of battery cells, which was a sourcing never done before. And we certainly could internally make use of these ideas, scaling effects, robustness, and so forth and so forth. So when you look on our truck, which is right now on the street, it basically has the same module as in VW cars, which allows us certainly to say they're super robust, well tested. It's already a kind of a proven technologies. And you had to say that in 2018-19, fuel cells, for example, had not that durability. We were talking about coking and so forth and so forth. And therefore, we did not make a decision on a serious development. We made a decision on a pre-series development. And that's how our decision took place. Right now, we have 80 to 85% of our portfolio completely turned into also battery electric trucks. So you always can buy an alternative, either diesel or a battery-driven solution. And for certain applications, we opened up then the door in also to think whether and how hydrogen can be a solution. So we have a BEV first, but not only strategy. And that what brings me perhaps also in the hydrogen leadership podcast.
Yeah, no, I think we don't want to paint a picture where the sky is always bright.
I was just joking a little
No,
bit.
it's fair, but we also need to hear voices that question things, and so I appreciate that it's not always a hurrah message, but we can talk about it. Okay. So let me make a small case to that. So. Stephen and I, we have been in China, and we have seen many truck manufacturers going on hydrogen. And those had a range of 1,000 kilometers already, which to a very affordable price. So roughly 880,000 RMB, which is a bit more than 100,000 euros. And knowing that China, for example, subsidized this with 50% in the future, you can buy a hydrogen truck for the price of a Passat. Knowing that these new technologies in Europe are way more costly. I know that they have to fulfill different standards. So the question I would like to see, I think range is also an issue. And as far as I understand, is hydrogen trucks can go for 1,000 kilometers. The battery electric trucks, you, I think, have this term of daily range. Can you share some insights how you see the playing field between these two technologies?
Yes, and you raised now a couple of aspects.
Yes.
When we start, I make your question last, and some other topics I would like to comment first. When you talk about logistical systems, they differ dependent on regulations you have. What do I mean with that? In Europe, you have that regulations that after 4.5 hours, the driver has to stop for 45 minutes. It's mandatory. So you have a logistical system which basically takes in this 4.5 hours of distance, and as the truck since a long time can only run 80 kilometers on a highway, you see warehouses, or everything is built up for 4.5 hours. And that certainly puts a little, it solves this problem of a battery electric powertrain because you can refuel in this 45 minutes.
Make use of it, the time you otherwise would be
your
lost.
disadvantage is a little bit taken away.
Okay.
When you talk about a Chinese system, especially those trucks which you are focusing on, they have a kind of a speed logistical system. So they have 2 drivers, or perhaps even 3, and then the key task is drive as fast from Shenzhen to Beijing as possible.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then certainly brakes are harmful.
Okay.
And then you need perhaps different solutions.
Okay.
Secondly, second comment to the Chinese system in itself, it's a very, very competitive environment where a lot of Chinese truck manufacturers, we believe, under also mathematics doesn't go away and physics also doesn't go away. So it's always hard to say, can you really produce trucks for that kind of money? And we believe that they have challenges in the profitability internal in China. The bigger opportunities are outside of China. So when you quote 88,000 renminbis, then I believe it is a price for which you can buy it. The question is how much margin is then left over according to your cost you have when you have those systems. Right. And certainly China has one big advantage in itself. It is a very transformative society. Yeah, when I mean, we both were born in the 70s. Yeah, we were raised in the 80s. When you compare our society today from the society we were grown up, okay, there were some changes, but not so much. When you compare Chinese society in the 80s to a Chinese society today, they have, basically transformed from 0 to 100. Yeah, so they are much more transformative. What do I mean with that? They're much more willing to let loose on old things and invest in new things. That's why they, for example, buses very fast change into battery electrics. Trucks in PES cars we see.
Also big changes.
Similar developments. We see also that they have a really dare to try. Yeah, a lot of PES car companies coming out of companies where you never expect that they would build battery. So they are much more. They're taking much more risk, much more transformative, also much more willing. To basically also supported by the government to then really to support with hard decisions this transformation about infrastructure installations and so forth and so forth. Yeah? And when you see their highway network, how it expanded in record time, when you see their railway system, how they expanded in record time, that are certainly, it's a very transformative society. That what I just want to pledge. So they are much more receptive for that. Going back to your questions, we with our 4.5 and 4.5 system with 9 hours on the clock of the driver certainly basically diminish a little bit the problem of reach. So nevertheless, with today's offering, 300 to 400 kilometers per shift, per 4.5 hours, is already close to the 1,100 kilometers you really need in order to be long haul ready.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you then foresee, because when you look the next 5 years ahead, you see certain next steps which are foreseeable on the technology development. Yeah, you see that. I mean, we will deliver soon 750 kW charging, which is known as megawatt charging. We also showcased already half a year ago that we can also go beyond 1 megawatt of charging power. Then you come to super fast to a reduction in charging speed, so diminishing this disadvantage. And you see by the announcements of the Chinese manufacturers right now that they already deliver this close to series in PES car industries. And then the foreseeable next step is that also battery density, so in size as well as in the density itself, might change also dramatically. And then we come to very different offerings possibilities. Yeah, so it always depends not only, it then depends on development speed. And as now...
And also the use case, if I understand. This is most important.
But millions and billions of dollars are now going basically in development of those technologies. Yes. What is the right battery cell technology? What is the charging technologies? What is the Leistungselektronik in a truck or in a car? There's so much focus right now that every month new patents, new ideas are coming up. And I believe that it seems like, I also don't foresee the future, otherwise I will play lotto and then I'm done. That battery has right now a big push in innovations, helping them to pass the way and overcome deficiencies. Whereas we see in the hydrogen space, due to the fact that it's driven as most of the times as we are driving it, as a second option, as a pre-development option, perhaps not as much money is in the game. And the jumps from a fuel cell, there are gradual improvements, but it's not leapfrogging like we go from 50 kW charging, which was high and ambitious in 2015, to 1 megawatt charging, which is basically high and ambitious when we speak right now in 2 to 10 years later.
So if I understand you correctly, the advancements in hydrogen technology are not fast enough compared to the advancements in the pure battery electric.
And that's foreseeable because the amount of money
is different
going into certain developments. So how many companies right now in China are trying to build battery electric vehicles? How many companies around the globe are trying that, and how many are investing into hydrogen development? Just by the pure scale of money, and
it's a different
different amount of people scratching their heads with their bright minds about solving problems.
Right.
So it's foreseeable that more problems will be solved where more brains are scratched.
Okay, so let me give it a different spin, because you mentioned that on the hydrogen sector you have this combustion engines and the fuel cell technology, and you're more or less in a pre-series scenario. So I ask myself, what would it take for you as a development R&D, to really give it a go for hydrogen on a serious production? So what indications, both technology and market, would you require to really serious go all in on hydrogen?
What we've done is like, and is public, and we showcase on the fair in Hanover, is that we bring a small series for hydrogen combustion. And that's not only for showcasing a technology, but it's also to see how receptive our customers are for that technology, and what kind of problems we can solve with this kind of application better than we can solve with the battery electric solutions. So when we talk transportation, everybody thinks about 40 tons, 4x2. Yeah, but we have also quite different transportation efforts, which are far beyond 40 tons, 150 tons when you want to basically transport windmills or something like that. So how do we want to decarbonize these propulsion systems? Yeah, because the diesel is a universal, it's used wherever. What is also obvious, that we are not only providing solutions for trucks and buses, but we are also providing solutions for third parties who are until now using diesel as a solution. So in agriculture, in C&I, and also in other applications like speedboats and pleasure boats and so forth. And certainly here you can see that also there hydrogen might play a role in future times as the main propulsion system or the main fueling system. So when you talk about ships, might be much more easy, especially if you then go to even bigger ships, that you have the full system changed to hydrogen, because you can store it better on the ship in itself. So we see that certain technologies which are right now commonly driven by diesel might change differently. But for the core of our products, in the current moment, we believe it's going battery electric.
Okay, Frederik, I understand. So you mentioned these engines business that you also have in your group. You do something with ski slopes where you have piston bodies also on hydrogen. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, as you know, the diesel engine is a very universal engine, propulsing since 100 years a lot of different applications. And we have, since a long time, serving customers also to deliver our diesel engines to them. So some of them are, for example, Klaas in the agriculture business. And what you just mentioned is the Kässbohrer Piston bully, which we are going skiing now by this nice red and running around the hills and helping us and allowing us to ski in the morning on the proper base. And with Kässbohrer, for example, we develop a solution because also in skiing resorts, most obvious, CO2 is a topic.
Is a topic, yes.
And if you want to really show that you are also transforming, you need also to transform those piston bullies.
Yes.
And Kässbohrer is doing so. And one of our engines, it's the same which we also put in our truck for the hydrogen combustion, are now used in order, and together with Kässbohrer, we built up a prototype in order to see whether and how this hydrogen-based propulsion system can be a solution in a ski resort.
So I think we now touched on a lot of topics. We touched on battery, we touched on hydrogen, we see these emerging technologies. I guess you are a very knowledgeable person with potentially a Mr. Q or Mrs. Q, just like James Bond, also building on the really fancy new stuff. So I ask myself, you as a R&D board member, do you have a special unit that is tracking new technologies and playing like Mr. Q on the very latest in tracking?
It's a yes and it's a no.
It's not existing officially.
It is existing officially, but certainly, I mean, funds are limited.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Yeah. As funds are limited, and we are in a very changing environment. When you compare ourselves to, let's say, 2015, we had to do 4 things. Sometimes we had to make something on the cabin, sometimes on the chassis, sometimes on the powertrain, yeah, and sometimes on the EE. If we talk today, we have different variances of powertrains. Could be not only diesel. We also have to invest in diesel because also our customers expect superior fuel efficiency. So we still earn our monies with diesel trucks. So we're also working on that. You have to work on battery. We discussed it. You have to invest also in hydrogen. Yeah. When we talked then other technologies like digitalization. So how do we do software defined vehicles? How do we get closer into the transportation management system of our customers? We certainly also debate about that. It's a lot in our industry about uptime. So who brings the biggest efficiency to our customers is certainly a preferred partner. So we also talk about preventive maintenance topics and so forth, and to the highest next steps, and then certainly the automation, the full autonomous truck. To far extent, we can also invest that. Yeah. So when you scale up all those investments,
they add up.
They add up, and then there's not enough money where we can say, let's do the thinking out of the box, completely new. How can we revolutionize our business? I believe with all those, what I just said, we have a complete revolution of our business anyhow in our hand. Yeah. And then what we are trying as an MAN to be very focused with those developments, which we try really that at the end, we are a little bit ahead of time with our concept to have then a more easy serious development. Yeah. So it's not longer a more experimental part to it, where some of the experiments can fail and we just drop them.
So you're driven to work on something that you deliver.
Yes, we try with those money which we invest in pre-development to be pretty close and decisive for our serious development. Yeah, like we did with the Bavaria fleet, where we build up fuel cell trucks to bring them really into the operations, to learn with our customers how the fuel cell is behaving, what are the advantages and disadvantages compared to battery electric propulsion systems or diesel propulsion systems. So we are rather closer to the customer with what you could say early experimental fleets. Yeah, and then we are doing fancy things which looks like Q in James Bond, and all of a sudden you find the miracle stone and turn your industry upside down.
That's not happening, right?
No.
Yeah, and okay, so now coming a little bit to an outlook, I think you have a big role to play in your company, and also I think your company can play a decisive role for the entire industry as you are driven to really advance this. What is the change that you want to build in your legacy? When you look back 2030 on your job and they say, Frederik, I did this. What would it be?
Well, I think when we look upon the next 5 years, I think it would be super crucial that we don't only bring a truck which is CO2 free, but we implement the system. Yeah, so that we really can say that those trucks we develop now into series are not one-offs, but we really see that the substantial part of our business is shifted into this CO2-free propulsion system, mainly battery electric propulsion system. If we can state that at the end of this next 5 years, which is a super short time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that a substantial part comes to life. And then we have the next great innovations into our trucks before we can read them in the newspapers. I think then we have made the right decisions.
Super. And as a professional, I always try to adapt and reflect. And if I knew what I know today, I would have avoided a lot of things in the past. Not that I regret the past, but is there anything which you would say that helped you knowing now, which you would like to have known earlier? Because our listeners who are inspired by your actions what would the recommendation of Frederik be if people want to become a leader like you?
So I always try to look rather through the front window than to the back mirror. So I believe that mistakes and also taking not the right turn in the first step, but in the second step, belongs to your life experience. Yeah, what I can recommend, I believe, and I've read it by Charlie Mugler, who wrote a nice book about his experience in life, is listen to those who had made already some of those experience. Yeah, I think there is a lot of knowledge around you that you don't have to experience everything new. Sometimes your parents knows it, when you are a child, or sometimes your teachers knows it, and so a little bit. That would be my recommendation, and that helps when you
To be curious to learn.
Yes, and listen. That it is helpful. But I think mistakes and also misachievements are the part of life. And as long as you are not hit by super hard bad luck, I think you have a very joyful life.
So this is a great ending, because I think what we are trying to do is to offer a format where professionals can listen. And I think you have shared a lot of secrets and insights. And I want to thank you for this interesting dialogue, dear Frederik. I hope that we could inspire people. And I also learned a lot about your company, and that you are Mr. Cool in crisis situation, but still trying to be human and a team player to advance your company forward.
Thank you, Björn, for inviting me, being part of your journey also. It's
Yes.
always interesting to see how also your endeavor is progressing step by step. I wish you all the best and see you soon.
Thank you very much.